Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You're all welcome to this webinar. We'll be starting within the next minutes. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. The world is at risk of the novel COVID-19 virus. And so the world is confronted today with health, social and economic, as well as environmental crisis that is unprecedented in terms of proportion. And this has triggered a recession of the global economy. For Nigeria, the largest economy in Africa, with a population of about 210 billion people, the impact of the pandemic has deepened the long-term effects of pre-existing trends in the country that will alter the structure of the economy. It is against this background that the 26th Nigeria Economic Summit, Tame Building Partnership for Resilience, will convey national and global policymakers, business leaders, development partners, and scholars to shape strategic partnership between national and subnational governments, businesses, and the civil society to not only chart a path to recovery, but very importantly, build resilience for the country's economy, businesses, and households to put Nigeria in a strong position within the changing world order. As the architecture of this new economy evolves, the 26th Nigeria Economic Summit, scheduled to hold from October 26 to 27, 2020, different stakeholders' engagements are being held in this manner, virtual conversations and sessions as we do the countdown to the summit. These conversations and sessions are seen as part of the big conversation for action for public and private sector stakeholders to reflect on the state of the Nigerian economy and indeed retain the country's economic fundamentals and explore emerging trends so that Nigeria can capitalize on the new opportunities thrown to us by this COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, chart a path to rapid recovery, highlight the role of Nigeria's subnationals as the frontier for a resilient Nigerian economy. In 2019, ladies and gentlemen, over 92 billion tons of materials were extracted and processed. While this has moved the Earth towards the edge of planetary boundary, it is said to have contributed to about half of global CO2 emissions. The resulting waste, whether in terms of solid, gaseous emissions, or liquid, this is seen to be associated with the linear economic model of take, make, and dispose that has been operated over the centuries. And of course, we know the impact it is having on us today as humans and the environment as well. Circular economy model of take, use, and return has been demonstrated to be the practical solution for living within our planetary boundaries, as it keeps the value of products, materials, and resources maintained for as long as possible, and waste also is significantly reduced or even eliminated. Across the world, ladies and gentlemen, the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic has further revealed that circular economy provides us with the opportunity to redesign our economy for a more socially conscious an environmentally safe world. For us in Nigeria, in the transition to circular economy, there are some basic and fundamental questions that must be asked and answers provided. For instance, what are the current practices in Nigeria as we transit to the circular economy model? Are there barriers and governance strategies to identify, to know, with a view to understanding this and indeed providing an acceleration with the solutions that we're going to provide? Ladies and gentlemen, what circular economic strategies and roadmap can Africa countries, and indeed Nigeria as we say now, and corporate organizations adopt as we transit? How do we build partnerships for a sustainable circular economy? Ladies and gentlemen, in fact, how do we deliver better outcomes in a post-COVID-19 pandemic era through circular economy? It is on the premise of giving responses to these questions that we are having this pre-summit webinar coordinated by the NESG Sustainability Policy Commission with a team increasing opportunities and sustaining resilience through circular economy in Nigeria. This session we want to understand is designed to create awareness of circular economy practices and build the much needed resilience into our ecosystems. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome. And thank you for joining this pre-26th Nigeria Economic Summit virtual meeting. My name is Dr. Eugene Itwa, and I'm the thematic lead for circular economy and natural ecosystem and forest. To share their knowledge and their insights on the issues and indeed the questions that have been raised, we have policy leaders, we have experts who are quite conversant with these issues. And so they'll be speaking to the team, increasing opportunities and sustaining resilience through circular economy in Nigeria. Before we start, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to do some little housekeeping just to tell our distinguished participants that please kindly turn off your microphone or mute your microphone so that we have a seamless conversation without any disturbance. If you have questions, you have observations, you have remarks that you think you want to share, please post them through the question box. You have Q&A. Responses will be given. You can also, if you want to, post them through the chat. At the base of your system, the Zoom control panel, of course, you will see all of this there. The speakers and our team in-house will try as much as possible to respond in the course of the sessions. Otherwise, during the session devoted to question and answers, all of this will be responded to. Also note, ladies and gentlemen, that this webinar is being recorded. For us to start, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to call on the Vice Chairman, Nigeria Economic Summit Group, who is going to give us the welcome address. Mr. Olaniyi Yusuf, please move closer to your system. Thank you very much. Once again, Mr. Olaniyi Yusuf is the Vice Chairman, Nigeria Economic Summit Group. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Itwa, and good afternoon, everyone. And it's my pleasure on behalf of the board of the Nigeria Economic Summit Group to welcome everyone to this pre-summit event. The Honorable Minister, Federal Minister of Environment, Head of Ministries, Departments and Agencies of Government, Captains of Industry, members of the international community, gentlemen of the press, members of the NASG, members of the Sustainability Policy Commission, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'm indeed very pleased to welcome you all to this pre-summit event of the 26th Nigerian Economic Summit, organized by the Nigeria Economic Summit Group, the NASG. This year, at the 26th NAS, we seek to engage stakeholders in a big conversation for action. And that really is the focus, a big conversation for action to shape strategic partnerships, to chart a path to recovery, and build resilience for the country's economy, our businesses, and also for all households, to ensure that we put Nigeria in a strong position within the changing world order. The big conversation for action will be driven by a series of pre-summit events, such as this session, to kickstart discussions on the summit theme, building partnerships for resilience. And so the theme of the 26th Economic Summit is building partnerships for resilience. And our hope is that these pre-summit events will enable us to convene a wider range of stakeholders to deliberate on a broad set of thematic and sectoral issues with relevant outcomes. It has become apparent that Nigeria must seize the opportunity presented by the COVID-19 pandemic to reevaluate its current practices and create more sustainable practices. Indeed, the essence of sustainability is to focus on creating a path to economic growth that continues to replicate itself and ultimately promotes prosperity in the years to come. Across the world, the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic revealed that circular economy has the potential to provide a more comprehensive response by redesigning our economy into one that is more resilient, socially just, and environmentally safe. The adoption of circular economy principles will lead to higher resource efficiency and less waste through innovation and the promotion of strategies that facilitate the reduce, reuse, repair, remanufacture, and recycle model. This webinar seeks to help drive circular economic policies and create a pathway to success and actual practice. And it is our hope that today's public-private dialogue will help to promote awareness of circular economic practices and also provide short to medium-term recommendations for the government, the private sector, and other stakeholders on how to address circular economic practices in Nigeria. Once again, I welcome you all, and I thank you for your participation. Thank you, Dr. Etuan.
Thank you very much, our Vice Chairman. That was quite a very brilliant way of helping us understand what we're up against with regard to this very summit. And that's a summit event that is opening a way for us to have a larger conversation focusing on the different sectorial themes. Thank you very much. And indeed for this, how can Nigeria transit very well? You have just given us the highlights, and indeed we are looking at both short-term, medium-term, and long-term strategies that Nigeria can actually adopt, springing from this webinar. Thank you very much for that. We will move on to our next speaker, who is going to give us the keynote address. He is the Honorable Minister for Environment in Nigeria, Ahmed Mahmoud Abubakar. He will be talking to us on delivering better outcomes in a post-COVID-19 pandemic era through a circular economy. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to call on the Honorable Minister, who indeed is actually ably represented by Mrs. Halima Bari, who is the Deputy Director, Vulnerability and Adaptation, and now overseeing the Climate Change Department. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Halima Bari, who is representing Dr. Mohammed Mahmoud Abubakar, the Honorable Minister for Environment in Nigeria. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Itwa. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name, as Dr. Itwa has said, is Halima Buari, a Deputy Director in the Department of Climate Change and currently overseeing that department. I have the singular honor of presenting and reading the Honorable Minister of Environment's keynote address. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to welcome you all to the 26th Nigerian Economic Summit pre-summit webinar on increasing opportunities and sustaining resilience through circular economy in Nigeria. I am particularly glad to note that the participation is broad across all environmental and industry stakeholder groups in the country. The circular economy, as you have heard earlier, is a new economic development model which came to fore after the emergence of the concept of sustainable development in 1992 at the famous United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, with the purpose of increasing resource utilization and environmental efficiency, also reducing the dependence of economic development on natural resources. The concept of the circular economy, as you have heard from the last two speakers, is increasingly gaining traction in developing countries and emerging economies. The government of Nigeria, Rwanda, and South Africa, for instance, launched the African Alliance on Circular Economy in 2017. The outcome of the 2017 summit of the EU and the African Union, known as the Abidjan Declaration, recognizes the high potential of the circular economy model for sustainable job creation and low emission, climate resilient and sustainable development. Also, the declaration of the African Ministerial Conference on the Environment in November 2019 underlined and reinforced African countries' commitment to promote circular economy approaches in Africa. The COVID-19 pandemic has moved many nations into a long period of lockdown such that the restrictions on transport and economic activities are constraining the supply side capacity, resulting in significant increases in food loss and waste, especially of perishable agricultural produce. Producers are also being impacted by the diminished access to important inputs for agriculture, such as inorganic fertilizers. Due to labor shortage and exposure risk, human and animal waste management, which are crucial to protect public health and the environment, have also become a challenge under the current restrictions imposed by the COVID-19 crisis. COVID-19 is not likely to be the last pandemic humanity will have to deal with, as long as we keep interacting with our environment in an intense and unsustainable manner that makes environmental degradation a regular feature in our development. The ministry recognizes the imperative for new thinking and approach to the management of the country's environment for sustainable development. It is in this light that the ministry developed the post-COVID-19 medium-term strategy plan of 2020 to 2022, with the purpose of placing the Federal Ministry of Environment in a strategic position to be able to respond effectively to any environmental challenges that may emerge after the initial environmental shocks created by the COVID-19 pandemic, some of which may become a part of global environmental normal. It will also ensure that the environmental challenges are properly mainstreamed into Nigeria's post-COVID-19 development roadmap. The post-COVID-19 medium-term strategic plan is for the management of Nigeria's environment in the next 2 years, as you may know, of the post-pandemic era in a holistic manner to ensure compliance with all relevant legal and statutory requirements, application of the best global practice principle, monitoring and reporting of environmental performance for the environmental sustainability of Nigeria's development in the post-COVID era. In developing this strategy, some key principles were adopted. They include consistency with national development priorities. 2, promoting equitable gender, youth, and children-sensitive sustainable development in national response to environmental challenges. 3, adopting multi-sectoral and coordinated participatory approach. 4, managing the country's ecosystem in an integrated manner. 5, treating the environment as a business by adopting entrepreneurship approach, viable environment-friendly businesses and ventures. 6, applying critical knowledge for environmental sustainability. And 7, sustaining strong institutions for effective environmental governance. Distinguished participants, the ministry is currently working on ensuring that most of the solid waste generated in the country are recovered, reused, or recycled as secondary material for remanufacturing through an enhanced waste management system. Thus, future efforts will target promoting the reduction of waste at source, segregation, reuse, recovery, recycling, and so on, towards greatly reducing the need for expansive and expensive waste treatment and disposal options. In the post-COVID-19 era, particular emphasis will be placed on protecting public health by removing putrescible and infectious waste from where people live as the initial driver for improved waste management in the country. In the spirit of taking the lead and keying into the principles of circular economy, the ministry will continue to focus on a more integrated and coordinated approach than hitherto adopted in managing environmental challenges of the country at all levels of governance for result-oriented impact and cost effectiveness with measurable indicators. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to therefore assure you that the ministry is committed to prioritizing our areas of immediate concerns and developing programs and guidelines to drive the country to establishing a circular economy. I would like to end this keynote address by recognizing and appreciating the central role played by the Nigerian Economic Summit Group in the sustainability sphere so far. The ministry looks forward to many more continued collaborations and partnerships in this regard. Meanwhile, I wish you all fruitful deliberations Thank you.
The Honorable Minister, ably represented by Mrs. Halima Bauer, thank you very much for giving us that keynote address. That also seemed to open the floodgate of understanding regarding circular economy. And indeed, you've gone ahead to tell us what the government is doing through the ministry. One thing I pick is that the ministry is already and indeed is willing to embrace the new approach. In the light of the pandemic, you have told us the principles that are being adopted. Are we looking at consistency with other policies? Are we looking at gender issue? Are we looking at sectorial, multi-sectorial integration? Indeed, how do we manage our ecological dimensions better than the way we have done? All of this you have actually alluded to in your speech. And of course, the entrepreneurial aspects, which this private sector hope for and indeed yearn for when it comes to business case regarding environmental issues. You have also told us that the ministry is giving attention to that as part of the principle that will support in driving circular economy. We want to thank you for that keynote address. And we look forward to harnessing all that have been presented or given to us, and then see how we are able to integrate this with other approaches like you had actually mentioned. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, those were the opening addresses from the Vice Chairman, Nigerian Economic Summit Group, Mr. Olaniyi Yusuf, and then the Honorable Minister of Environment, represented by Halima Bauer Bari. We will move on to further insights, especially now focusing on the technical aspects of what we are looking at. This time, we will give attention to this topic, moving towards a circular economy model in Nigeria, current practices. To speak to us is the Director General, National Environmental Standards and Regulations Enforcement Agency, NESRA. He is Professor Aliu Jaro. Prof, please, we are all ears. Thank you very much. Once again, take note, he's talking on moving towards a circular economy model in Nigeria, current practices. Please, Prof.
Is on mute.
Prof is muted. You need to unmute yourself, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much for this opportunity, Dr. Itwa, fellow panelists, all participants. Good afternoon. So it's a big opportunity for me to talk on the circular economy and how far we have gone in Nigeria. I don't know, can you share my screen from, or should I be the one to share it?
Yeah, if you want to share it.
Good. So thank you very much. Moving towards a circular economy model in Nigeria. Next slide. So this is my presentation overview. What is circular economy? So an economic system in which resource that is aimed at maximizing the use of resource and also increasing the continual use of resources is what we call the circular economy. So the circular economy works in line with the 5 R's: to reduce, reuse, repair, and also to recycle. That is the waste hierarchy, the 5 R's. So it is targeted at ensuring that we reduce the generation of waste. This is done by opting out for the buying of items that comes in large forms, so that instead of buying small items, and also for some household items like milk, you can buy the sachet and empty into a container. So we have reuse, repair, and recycle. So it is also aimed at reducing material extraction where possible by reusing parts and also some of the waste. Most of the resources we use, especially the natural resources, are not reusable. So you continue to just tap these resources and use anyhow, the process definitely is not going to be sustainable. For a sustainable practice, then this circular economy is very, very important. And thirdly, value is created by providing the worth of the raw material as pure as possible in the complete value chain, thereby retaining the material. Next slide. So we look at Nigerian transition to circular economy. So the journey for circular economy in Nigeria started with the initiation of the extended producer responsibility, that is the EPR program, in resolving the perennial waste management problem. Nigeria is a population of over 120 million. So a lot of waste is being generated. An approximate amount of 42 million tons of waste is generated annually. So to take care of this waste, definitely we need to look for an option. So EPR becomes one of the best options. So the EPR program is an environmental protection strategy with the objective of total decreased environmental impact of the product using a life cycle management approach. So in view of that, next year, as an enforcement agency, we came up with 33 environmental regulations. So those in the brown environment, that is the environmental sector, a lot of them have the EPR component embedded in the provision of these regulations, especially the National Environmental Food, Beverages and Tobacco Sector Regulation. We also have National Environmental Electrical Electronics Sector Regulation, among others. So we have the EPR component in them. So with the EPR provisions of the regulations, industries are encouraged to have a closed cycle manufacturing system so that we have an efficient take-back schemes for continuous use of the raw materials by recycling, thereby promoting circular economy. Also, the EPR places the burden of waste management on the generators, that is producers, distributors, importers, among others, who are obliged to take back their product at its end of life. So in the regulations, there's a provision for a polluter pays principle. And this EPR model is the best way to go about it so that instead of just taking out the waste and find a place to just dump it, the waste is used as a raw material. So in order to fast track the transition to circular economy, the National Assembly convened a stakeholders meeting on 23rd June 2014, where a lot of industries and businesses and the general public were invited to discuss the implementation of the producer responsibility program, that is the EPR, extended producer responsibility by the sector players. So at the end of the meeting, a communique was issued. So amongst what is issued is that industries and businesses are expected to organize themselves within their respective sectors and come up with a framework and business plan to operationalize the EPR by 30th September 2014. And next year, being the enforcement arm of the Ministry of Environment, was charged to develop a comprehensive EPR guidelines for stakeholders. So some of the businesses at that time submitted their proposals, but it did not meet up with the environmental best practices. So in view of that, the circular economic model for Nigeria is as contained in the EPR operational guidelines published by NESRIA in 2014. So the agency took some time to come up with these operational guidelines where a lot of stakeholders were engaged, and most of them made 1 or 2 inputs. So we had this guideline published. So the PRO model, that is the Producer Responsibility Organization model, was adopted to drive the EPR program in line with international environmental best practices, as done in several other countries of the world, where EPR is in operation. So the PRO is a third-party organization formed by producers in order to manage the end-of-life waste products, including the packaging, on behalf of these producers, which includes the implementation of the mandatory take-back scheme. The EPR implementation model was adopted by Nigeria, which is based on the best approach with single PRO for each of these sectors. Since we have different sectors, so it is planned that each sector should have its own separate PRO. So on the screen, we have the flow chart of the EPR model in Nigeria. At the middle, we have the PRO. So at top, we have the NESRIA, that is the enforcement agency. So the NESRIA liaises directly with the PRO. The PRO manages the collectors and the recyclers on behalf of the producers. So the producers are those that fund the PRO, that is the Producer Responsibility Organization. The collectors are those that collect most of these waste materials. So they liaise with the consumers and the informal collectors. The informal collectors are those that we see day in, day out, going around households collecting useful items from the garbage. So we call them informal collectors. So the target is for this process to be formalized so that it will be done in the best way, the collection and the recycling. Because if you look at it, most of these informal collectors, they're exposed to a lot of hazard. And likewise, the recycling is not done in the best way. Most of the times, a lot of value materials are being lost. Likewise, they do it in such a way that it impacts on the environment. So the target is to make it the best way so that you get the best value from this waste, and also to prevent the harmful effect on the environment. Next. So the operational guidelines delineates roles and responsibilities for the key sector players. The key sector players are the producers, the consumers, the collectors, recyclers, and also the PROs, and the government. So each of these players have certain responsibilities as outlined in the guidelines. For instance, the producers are expected to ensure that the waste generated in the cost of their production is being collected and being recycled in the first place. Secondly, they should ensure that the end-of-life product is also collected and taken to the right place for recycling. They are also expected to provide certain identification for all items produced. So likewise, they are expected to fund the producer responsibility organization so that they can be able to manage the collectors and the recyclers. Secondly, the target waste streams are contained in the operational guidelines, and they include used batteries, packaging waste, e-waste, plastics, tires, chemicals, papers, etc. The implementation of the EPR program is currently being piloted in 3 sectors: the food and beverages, the automobile, where we have the used lead acid battery waste, and the electrical electronics sector, while gradually scaling down to other sectors to address the metal and tire waste streams. Sector-specific EPR guidelines are also being developed to reflect the peculiarities in the various sectors. So as required in the operational guidelines, some producers in the 3 sectors have organized themselves and registered their PROs with the Corporate Affairs Commission with facilitation from Nigerian. The PROs are the Food and Beverages Recycling Alliance, which manages the food and beverages sector. So this alliance was formed by some of these giant companies that produce beverages. The Coca-Cola, the 7-Up, the Nigerian Bottling Company, and others. 5 of them came together to start off this alliance. And the second one, we have the Alliance for Responsible Battery Alliance. Alliance for Responsible Battery Recycling. It's not sustainable battery recycling. So the ARBR, which is formed in order to manage the battery waste stream. And the third one, the e-waste producer responsibility, the e-waste producer responsibility organization, that is the EPRON.
No, Prof, I don't hear it.
Meant to manage the waste coming from the electrical electronic. It's a driving force in waste avoidance, pollution prevention, and reduction towards. Hello?
We can hear you now.
Okay. So the benefit include improvement of environmental performance, improvement of environmental quality, treatment of waste as a resource, provision of a framework for public-private partnership to solid waste management, promotion of wealth creation and green jobs, and provision of opportunities for learning and application of global environmental best practices. Next. So some of the benefits also include waste collection. People will be involved in this one and they get a lot of investment opportunities. Transportation is also another value chain. Material recovery, work that works in the recycling facilities. We have dismantlers and we have the real recyclers. There's also an opportunity for equipment fabrication, equipment that is required, especially in the dismantling and the recycling of this waste. We have to redesign our research. Most of these products need to be redesigned so that we use less raw materials, which will lead to reduction in the amount of waste to be generated. We have smelters. Some of the metallic components recovered needs to be smelted before being used again. And also we have IT companies that are engaged in order to develop the database, the registry, among others, for efficient taking of this waste, also the management.
Okay.
So, conclusion, the recent pandemic has exposed the weak supply chain system. Need to build economic resilience through circular economy. Nigeria has provided a platform for circular economy implementation. The industries are encouraged to key into the program by identifying the relevant sector PRO or establish new ones where there is none in order to manage their waste streams. T is glad to use this platform economics to seek for stakeholders to come on and bring everyone on board the program. We encourage everyone to join Nesria in ensuring a clean and healthy environment through this circular economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jaro, the Director General of Nesra, for taking us through the transition and indeed the practices that have been through the extended producer's responsibility, and of course telling us the opportunities therein, especially as piloted by the three sectors. And we hope we'll be able to, beyond the waste streams that are generated, we'll be able to prevent the waste stream from coming up as well. Thank you very much for that. And we will quickly move on to the next speaker, who will be talking to us on the strategies, circular economy strategies, and roadmap for Nigeria, and indeed for the African countries. Are you also a corporate organization? How can you benefit from this strategy and the roadmap? Please, let's pay attention to the Director, Climate Change and Green Growth, African Development Bank, Professor Anthony Young. Professor Young, please, you have the floor, so to speak. We can see your screen. Unmute yourself, sir. We can see your screen.
Okay, can you hear me?
Very well now.
Okay, thank you so very much for the invitation to attend this meeting of very eminent persons. The NEST is an organization we all respect for the great things you're doing in driving Nigeria's economic agenda. The first question people normally would ask me is, why is the African Development Bank really interested in green growth and circular economy and all that? We have just one purpose, and that purpose is to support sustainable development on the African continent. And anything that challenges that sustainable development issue threatens our very existence. So we are constantly out looking at what are the challenges to the achievement of this, and also what are the opportunities that we can tap on. So for my presentation today, I know that the minister gave a very good presentation on this and reinforced by Professor Jarreau on this. I'm not going to go deep into what this, we've passed the stage of what is the circular economy thing after hearing these two eminent speech and presentation. But when you look at the diagram on the map, which I'm showing you, you see on average, if you draw a trend line, you realize that many African countries are growing, GDP is growing. Except if we do this now, the COVID-19, we're going to see a bit of a dip. But frankly, after that, it will bounce back again. So what is the problem? But when you look at the map of fragility in the world, you see that the African continent stands center. The darker the colors you've seen, the more fragile that we are. And what is driving this fragility is largely dependent on raw natural resources. That's where we are. Our economies are driven by natural resources in their blend form. And we have always had this very erroneous belief that Africa is so well endowed with natural resources. 2009, the African Development Bank with WWF did a study and come up with the Africa Ecological Footprint Report that debunks that concept that we have so much resources. Our footprint was so much, and the rate of depletion of our natural resources was unimaginable. And the idea was, how do we begin to use these resources properly to ensure that we live within planetary limits, that we do not overexhaust our resources? And I think that's why the concept of the circularity bounced back again to see how can we be more efficient. So over the years, what have we learned in being able to develop a roadmap for anybody or countries, corporate organizations? We've learned that first, there is no universal definition of the circular economy. It takes note of local realities on the ground. We've listened to my colleague, the Director General of NESRIA, looking at the issues of waste, extended producer responsibility, which is an excellent initiative. But we also have some others who will be looking at resource efficiency upstream to minimize waste downstream. We've also seen circular economies that are looking more at energy efficiency. How do we make sure that our energy intensity is not that high? How do we manage standards and so on? So those are the issues. First, let's understand that there is no universal definition. We cannot follow the pathway of Finland. We cannot follow the pathway of UK. The African continent cannot follow the path of Europe in developing. We can learn from each other. But the bottom line remains that it will be our own reality. And then currently, the focus is so much on waste management, but circularity definitely goes beyond recycling economy, like we've mentioned. But if that is a starting point for several agencies, organizations, countries, it's a very welcome development. It's also an economic diversification strategy. Strong. I'm glad with NESRIA mentioned the job opportunities, the economic diversification, and so on. But to do this, what we've had thus far has been pockets of initiatives here and there. I think there would be a need to have a roadmap. Where are we? Where are we heading to? How do we get there? If not, we might find ourselves in uncoordinated initiatives that do not speak to each other. What are the key drivers of any roadmap that we might be developing? There are socioeconomic drivers, like I've mentioned. What happens in UK is not what is going to happen in Nigeria. You know, we have opportunities for job creation, which we need to take advantage of. We have farmers. The president of the African Development Bank is an agricultural specialist. And we have young kids coming into that space now who have never entered a farmland, who do not have any intention of entering a farmland, but they could stay in their offices with their apps, analyze your farm, identify the nutrient deficiencies, and then with drones, apply fertilizers, different types of things to your place. Why? Efficiency. they are doing that to improve. So there are things that we need to do. In doing so, we minimize waste. Right now, the minister has mentioned COVID-19. Yes, everyone says we need to bounce back better. We cannot go back or recover into a situation that put us in the quagmire we found ourselves in today. So we must build back better, we must bounce back better. The circular economy gives us that opportunity to do so. Then there are policy drivers in terms of making sure that we deal with environmental and social issues. And then there's a shift to low carbon development. Every country basically assigned onto it, either for the SDGs or for the Paris Agreement, that we need to get to a carbon neutral 2050 or second half of the century. But how we get there, the pathways we get there will be very different from each other. And that's why I call it a just transition to a low carbon circular economy. It has to be just. You make do with what you have, you make do with your skill set, your resource base, and then you take it from there. It's not an imported idea. So developing a roadmap will be something that we need to implement. But what are the opportunities we have for this? Our demographics, large population coming up and getting into the labor market. If we do not identify every opportunity to absorb this huge 500 million people in the labor market by 2025, I think we'll be sitting on a time bomb. Circular economy provides one of such veritable opportunities for job creation. We have urbanization, that you're going to have a lot of waste being thrown out, being reduced, and consumption patterns. So we need to deal with it. We have digital technology development. I've just talked about the farmers in their offices with their bow ties and iPads and technologies and drones doing the job. We need to take advantage of that to improve efficiency. Then there's a growing middle class. And when you look at the NDCs, the nationally determined contributions, there are opportunities. We've done a study of all the nationally determined contributions of African countries, and we found a $3 trillion market opportunity by 2020, which means there's opportunity for job creation, for investment, for impact investors, and so on. And what have we identified? For instance, in those NDCs, 14 of the 51 NDCs that have been ratified talk specifically on sustainable consumption and production. That's circular economy. 5 talk about ecotourism. You have 38 that talk about land management for mitigation. And when you get to adaptation, you find 36 climate smart agriculture. You have soil restoration. And then you have water resources, where efficiency in water resources will be very key. So even this means countries have already signed on to it. They want to do it. That is why they have signed on to the NDCs with this target. So it becomes easy now for us to get into those to develop a roadmap. But in developing this roadmap, the Honorable Minister has highlighted this, and then the Director General talking about the strategy for the EPR basically talks about what it is that we would also do for any other circular economy roadmap. But then there are 5 key things I believe we should watch out for. Why are we doing it? Why are we developing a roadmap? If we're not convinced, then it will not work. If we're convinced, then we need the political will to do it. It's not because we have received funding from the FDB or funding from the EU or funding from GIZ, so we must do it. There must be that belief, why are we doing it? And to me, the main reason is to ensure a transition to a carbon neutral circular economy, which is very good. It minimizes not just all the R's at the end, but upstream resource efficiency, production efficiency. If you're more efficient upstream, the waste downstream will be greatly minimized. And the second is how. We've all said it is a multi-sectoral strategy. It's not something that one individual organization will do. So we need to bring everybody to the table. You'll be surprised who has an interest. It's good for the environment to lead. It's good as Nigeria, for instance, in Nigeria is leading, but the gender and women ministry has a very strong role to play. Industries has a very strong role to play. Everyone, energy has a very strong role to play. So bringing these people together will be very important. And what is it that we'll be doing with that roadmap? What specific goals and actions need to be taken? Is it developing criteria and standards for the various sectors, which is very important? For instance, that's what Nigeria is doing, developing the standards. And then is it the access to finance, which is very important? Most countries cannot do it alone. They don't really believe in it. But if there is some resources available to pilot for them to see this is actually very good, I think they can take on that, including even technical assistance for companies. Why would a company want to do it? Right now, we're working with several organizations, Nestle, Coca-Cola, some yogurt companies, for them to see the benefit of the circular economy, not just in waste disposal, but upstream in production efficiency. So who is going to drive this agenda? For Nigeria, I'm glad Nigeria is there driving this agenda. So it's very key that in every roadmap, there must be a driver, somebody driving that agenda. And I believe that Nigeria is taking the lead and demonstrating to the continent that this is possible and can be done. Every roadmap has a destination. You're going somewhere. What time span are we looking at? Is it the SDGs 2030, or is it using the SDGs to get to the low carbon or carbon neutrality in the second half of the century? Or for corporations, is it a 5-year roadmap? You want to see how you can improve your efficiency of 10 years. These are things that every organization and country will need to look at. So here I just mentioned some, I'll leave it at that. The countries that are taking steps. No country here that I know has fully in Africa developed a roadmap. We are in the process of identifying some countries, working with them to develop their roadmaps. But at least Nigeria has the Extended Producer Responsibility Program, which focuses on waste. Ethiopia is multi-sectoral. Rwanda has been on plastics, very good on that. And then Senegal has also had a meeting that is now driving the development of that. Let us not forget the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. This is going to be very important, to regulate trade of secondary stroke hazardous waste materials. This is where we can have a very big low-hanging fruit in circular economy initiatives. And for the African Development Bank, what is it that we've done? We have set up an Africa Circular Economy Facility. It's not much. It's a seed fund, 4 million euro, that can help African countries, or some African countries, to kickstart the development of their roadmap, provide interventions to the private sector. They need to understand what is in it for them. Then we also have the Africa Circular Economy Alliance, which my colleague from South Africa will talk about. The African Development Bank is the secretariat of that initiative. This is a government-led where countries, and I'm pleased that Nigeria was one of the founding members of this initiative. We have a Transitioning Africa to a Circular Economy program funded by the Global Environment Facility. We're still negotiating the exact amount, somewhere between $50 and $100 million. So these are resources that will be available for countries. Then the Nigeria Circular Economy Working Group, which has kickstarted, which should merge and actually morph with the NES group on this, that brings together academics, practitioners, everyone to support the development and implementation of circular economies in Nigeria, for instance. Then we have other investments, private sector, public sector, on different aspects of circular economy. I'm rounding up. How do we finance this circular economy beyond the programs I've talked about? It's a cross-cutting issue. It's multi-sectoral. I don't really have one circular economy project, but I have circular economy embedded in so many of our activities that we can fund from our statutory allocations, either from the private sector or from the sovereign window. And then we have instruments like guarantees, equity, debt, and so on that are available to help countries in doing that. Then we also have different trust funds. And in these trust funds, some are managed by the bank, some the bank is an accredited entity for it, but we have access to money. So typically, we look at some of the trust funds, whether it's the climate investment funds, the GEF, the adaptation fund. we've identified those that can help public sector in preparing the enabling environment, like policies, roadmaps. We have some that can actually help in project preparation and development itself. And then the third are those that can support project finance. You already have a project, come on board, and let's see how the African Development Bank can support you. So there are several other circular economy initiatives which will be good that we create a community of practice to see how do we learn from each other, what works where, what doesn't work where, and so on. So I think it's important. The more we have these organizations, the better for us. Finally, basic examples that people take for granted. We have waste bins being repurposed, for instance, as public hand washing. That's a circular recycling, repurposing. Then we also have masks. Either before now, most of these masks would have been thrown away, this fabric, because they're too small to make a shirt. So what has happened is they have not been used to do non-disposable face masks. And we have these also, several of such initiatives that we can look at. Thank you very much. Roadmaps are important, but they must speak to the specificity of each organization or each country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Anthony Young, for helping us again to understand the kind of things we should look out for when we are developing a roadmap and indeed strategy for circular economy. We will not waste so much time, actually what has been said already, but suffice it to say that one of the key things he said is there are elements that must be given consideration when we are developing a roadmap. Could it be why or how, what, and indeed, who does what and when? Thank you very much for taking us through all of that. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, if you just joined us at the beginning, we had said that if you have any questions, observations, comments, please post them through the Q&A box. We have indeed seen a number of individuals doing that. We commend you. Please continue to do that because you will not have an opportunity to speak like the speakers. The questions will be responded to. Kindly do that, please. We will move on to looking at how we can build partnership. The topic indeed is building partnership for a sustainable circular economy. Where we have the Director, Corporate Affairs and Sustainable Business, Unilever Nigeria PLC, Mrs. Shorimidayo George. Please, we're waiting to hear you. On the topic, once again, building partnership for a sustainable circular economy.
Dr. Eugene, thank you very much. I'm laughing because of how you pronounced my name, but I find it endearing. We'll talk about that later. It's indeed a pleasure to be here with you on this platform. Thank you for having me. We've had several conversations, Dr. Eugene, and you've also Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah,
yes, very well.
We already, we
got
losing
yes.
But hear you now.
Okay, so I said thank you very much for helping me. You've indeed been a great support for us in Unilever and talking about collaborative efforts and building partnerships. You've been a good example of that for us and from a point of NESG in closing the loop, with all the actors.
Again, we're losing your,
I'm not sure what's going on, but I hope I would be staying stable now. Let me just get on with my short presentation. And I don't know if, if you're going to help me put up my slides. I just have a couple of slides just to talk through the topic of building partnerships for a sustainable circular economy in Nigeria.
Thank you. And in the event, in the event that there is still some issues with the network, we might remove your video so that you can just speak and reduce the bandwidth. Please go ahead.
Okay, I think I'm going to put off my video. Can you hear me?
Yep,
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Okay, I'm going to put off my video because I'm changing. Yeah, I'm changing slides.
I can hear you. Go ahead with your video off. We can hear you loud and clear. It's very clear.
Okay. So thank you. Like I said, thank you for having me. And this is a unique opportunity and a very pertinent topic. Let me take my cue from what we have known and signed up for some time, which is our charter, if you will, through SDG 17, specifically looking at target 16, where both the public sector and the private sector, both the public and the private sector subscribe to a plan of actualizing better development impacts through a multi-stakeholder approach, leveraging on a broad spectrum of expertise, knowledge across many actors and sectors, and pulling in better financial resources as well. And I know a lot of panelists here on this platform have mentioned the issue of funding, the issue of collaborations across many sectors. I think this is the way to go. I think this is the way to go, basically because there's a lot that we can do in terms of leveraging on partnerships, and particularly the right kind of partnerships. And that is what we should be looking at when we're talking about circular economy, because it involves several actors across several value chains. I like the thinking behind the conversations. Thank you very much for yes, that's the right slide. I like the thinking behind the conversations on this platform in looking at how to, develop economic sustenance and creating jobs through the circular economy. And I think that is what we should be focusing on, because there are areas of innovation, there are areas of solutions that we can really harness in terms of opportunities in circular economics. I can't put on the issue of COVID-19 numbers in Africa and in Nigeria, which is still perplexing. The expectations and the projections are that the numbers will be higher than it currently is. So, but going around Lagos, I still see quite a number of people clustering around with the face masks nicely straddled on their chins and no social distancing. So the question for so many is that who see this as well is why the numbers are so incredibly lower than what is expected. Having said that, we see that the efforts by the government to address COVID-19 has had a toll economically. And I was doing in my research, I came across 2 World Bank reports, which estimates that a decline in GDP per capita of 3% will increase the number of Africans living below the international poverty line of $1.90 by 13 million. And I'm talking about this contextually just to see how much more we need to do in terms of forging partnerships to be able to address the issue of poverty and harnessing the benefits that are inherent in circular economy. So the report says that if the downturn is prolonged or becomes even more severe, considerably more than 13 million will become poor. There's an estimate in another report, World Bank report, that says the poverty incidence for Nigeria in 2020 was around 2 million before COVID. But now with the pandemic, they estimate this to be 5 million more people, bringing the numbers to 7 million more people to be thrown into poverty this year in Nigeria alone. And so the report goes on and on. They also spoke about the fact that 79% of the respondents in the survey conducted, had reported income losses, and 42% of those who were already employed are no longer working. So this is a huge setback, and it would erase several years of hard work, hard-won progress in poverty reduction. So the focus for us now, especially with the opportunities inherent in circular economy, and with the conversations we've been having with NESG and different actors, is to stimulate those conversations even much more in the right direction, to see how we can innovatively use this to create more economic headwinds through partnerships, through building more partnerships across the different actors. And so this is where the focus for the collaborations that we've been also been involved has looked into from a private sector. In summary, just looking at how we can transform waste to wealth. And we need to develop a new paradigm through partnerships. One focuses on integrated resource management, the concepts of zero waste and the circular economy. It is important that we establish collaborative networks focused on creating value and economic development opportunities. We need to look at a strategy of collaboration between the public, non-profit, and private sectors. For example, in a city where residents and entrepreneurs do not think in terms of waste, but in terms of resources with permanent economic and social value. And we need to focus on innovations and solutions that will support a socially balanced and environmentally restorative and resource regenerative economy. This strategy involves solutions development that is not housed in one sector, community education, working with actors in the community, and engagement across a broad sector, and attracting resource innovators and entrepreneurs for market-driven solutions. So if you go to the next slide, please. So I'm not going to dwell on there was a previous slide. I wanted to talk touch points of collaborations. So I'm not going to dwell on this slide. I basically wanted to show you that there's a broad loop, of circular economy, looking at different touch points. So it's quite broad. And I know a lot of people have spoken about from raw materials, how do we, from raw materials back to raw materials that would impute into a manufacturing or a production process. You have actors in the design stage, right? Who are designing the products, who are designing the solutions. You have actors in the production stage. You have actors in the distribution stage. You have actors, in the consumer stage. So you have actors across all the spectrum that we then need to begin to map out, to understand, where they can come in and see how we can work together. But right in the middle of that loop is the government. And it's very important, and I thank NESG for bringing the Ministry of Environment here, ably represented by the representative of the Honorable Minister, and Nezria, who we've been working with in the private sector, and also AFTB, because it's very important for us to then have that enabling environment, and for the government also to begin to think in terms of market-driven solutions. And because that is the way for us to harness the opportunities, leverage on the collective effort to create a bigger and positive impact. And don't forget that I started contextually by talking about the huge problem that we're facing in terms of the number of people that will be further thrown into poverty, and how there are inherent opportunities in circular economy for us to create collaborative efforts to be able to do something about creating more jobs and enterprises. So if you go to the next slide, please. I'm going to just touch on a case study, and the case study is one that is probably known to a lot of us, which is plastics. Plastics have become, as we well know, a pervasive material of a modern economy. Plastic is very, very valuable. It's very easy to use. It's low cost, and its use has increased in the last past half century. But whilst plastics and plastic packaging are an integral part of our global economy and deliver many benefits, the very architecture of the plastics packaging itself, make dispose value chain entail significant economic and environmental drawbacks. So it is only in the last few years, really, that the true extent of these drawbacks have become very clear. We now know, more than 40 years after the launch of the very first universal recycling symbol, that only a very small percentage of plastic packaging is collected for recycling globally. And so there's a growing recognition, which is triggering action across the world. Policymakers continue to broaden and refine, the policies and regulations for plastics. not to be punitive in nature. It's to just to be able to rethink how we use plastics and to be able to use plastic to harness the opportunities in plastics to be able to create new income and work with it in terms of circular economy. So the new plastics economy presents a bold and much needed vision for a plastic system that works. It provides a new way of thinking about plastics as an effective global material flow aligned with the principle of circular economy, and it aims to harness the benefits of plastics while addressing its drawbacks, delivering drastically better system-wide economic and environmental outcomes. Can you hear me now?
Very well.
Okay, so if you go to the next slide. So there's been so much that has been done in terms of collaboration, but I say so much because the awareness has just begun to increase. Maybe I shouldn't use the term so much. We've done a bit, but there's still much more room for us to be able to do more. And I'm just going to show a few of the examples in winding down. One is an association called GRIBE. GRIBE is a Ghana Recycling Initiative by private enterprises. It's an industry-led coalition formed under the Association of Ghana Industries. Association of Ghana Industries, AGI is a type of man that we have in Nigeria, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. They have a stake in the plastic sector to integrate sustainable waste management solutions, particularly around plastics. GRIBE was founded in November 2017 by 8 multinational companies with varied products, and a proven track record of involvement in sustainability actions. And the founding members are Unilever, Ghana, Coca-Cola, Dow Chemical, West Africa, Fan Mill, Guinness Ghana, Nestle Ghana, PZ Cousins Ghana, and Voltic Limited. And so that's one example of a collaboration. The next slide, the next one has been mentioned, so I won't go into detail in terms of FIBRA. FIBRA, we know, is another type of GRIBE in Nigeria, also made of private sector actors. Next slide. Then I would now touch on a case study. So if you go to the next slide, a case study by Unilever. And Unilever has made bold targets and bold steps in terms of a circular economy, specifically looking not only in the area of plastic, but taking the really audacious steps in plastics, looking at plastics and having targets by the year 2025, looking at different things by cutting the use of their virgin plastic in half, collecting and processing more than they sell, using 100% recyclable, reusable or combustible plastics packaging. These are the kind of things that Unilever has done, globally all over the world. In Nigeria specifically, Unilever has a unique relationship with a non-profit organization called Recyclers. Their relationship with Recyclers started in 2014. They recognize, as we know, the challenge of plastic in West Africa cities has escalated to life-threatening levels. And so roughly about 16 million, and some quotes 19 million tons of plastics are generated every year in Nigeria alone. Most of it sits around in the environment, and everybody will see that when you're walking around. So this heightens the need for businesses to support government initiatives to solve the plastic problem. In 2017, Unilever committed to a recycle exchange partnership with Recyclers towards creating a circular economy that translates wealth to waste, starting with community-based initiatives in 5 locations in Lagos in 2019. In 5 locations around Lagos. Plastic waste is then being collected through all this community involvement, education, involving people in the community at the very local level of the local government. So the initial goal for Unilever is to have plastic neutrality for in 3 years. So but I think from the last results, there've been much more in terms of what has been done to the project. So this initiative, and the unique thing about this initiative is that it involves women and young people, and the initiative has helped them to increase their earning power by 175%, thereby driving inclusion, empowerment, and environmental wealth. Participants have grown their businesses and started new businesses, new business ventures, paid their school fees with the proceeds, and they're developing green attitudes as well. So if we look at the Unilever case study in terms of collaborative efforts, it starts with working with government. So Unilever has worked with government through, maybe working through NESG, through working directly with the state government in terms of creating, policies and talking about initiatives on circular economy. They work with the society through the partnership that they have with recyclers and Gripe, maybe in Ghana, educating people within the communities and all that. They work with trade associations like the AGI, work with consumers through the work that they're doing at the grassroots, and looking at working with multilateral types organizations like the United Nations Global Compact Network in Nigeria, work with non-profits, and then look at the whole recycling, upcycle loop, and collaborating with private sector actors as well. They're talking with Lafarge to look at how they can recycle and turn some of their materials into other products. So these are examples of collaborative efforts. And I think the beauty about this in my closing is that, the most important thing is for us to be able to look at how we can pull together efforts, across different actors, partnerships, and harness the expertise, and the pool of resources that we have across different sectors. And I think that is why it is very important as we build the map, the strategy, the map, the roadmap towards a circular economy, that we then look at it from this angle. And so that is it in a nutshell.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We appreciate this eloquent presentation on the need to build sustainable partnership as we transit towards the circular economy model. We will not have to repeat all that has been said. We will move on to the last speaker because time is fast spent now. Again, we know there are barriers. We have also talked about governance issues, but then we want to look at it a bit more closely. What are the barriers and the governance strategies towards accelerating circular economy? Now, we will invite the Chief Director, Chemicals and Waste Policy, Monitoring and Evaluation, Department of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries in South Africa. He has also been at the forefront of circular economy activities, and this we know. He's going to talk to us on barriers and governance strategies to accelerate circular economy transitions. Mr. Guta Mokena, please, we would like to hear you. Mr. Mokena?
Thank you very much, Program Director, and good afternoon to all the distinguished guests. I'm hoping that the slides are showing on the screen. I'm just confirming whether you're able to see the screen with the slides.
Yeah, we can see it.
Thank you very much. So just to start with thanking and appreciating the opportunity from the organizer and the facilitator, moderator, and recognizing the minister and all the distinguished guests and all protocol observed. as an introduction, link between population size as well as growth and the generation of waste is well understood globally.
Sorry, we're losing your network is a bit poor.
The population growth as well as the resource consumption very closely linked as per the State of Waste Report 2018 that South Africa has developed. I won't repeat what has been said on circular economy, but it's safe to indicate
Please,
that it has been—
Can you take his video off?
Thank you. So it's safe to say that circular economy has been gathering a lot of momentum recently in the business world, as well as in the political and government circles, largely in the waste management sector, to improve efficiencies and performance in the different areas. A lot of these activities are taking place in other parts of the world, Europe and China as an example. And in Africa, there are initiatives, as we'd have heard from Honorable Minister on the Africa Alliance on circular economy, but we are comparing notes with other colleagues in other parts of the world in as far as circular economy implementation is concerned. Circular economy has opportunities for small, medium, and micro enterprises development, potential for youth, women, and other designated groups to participate. So as long as the barriers are removed, there are governance mechanisms for participation. And on the current pandemic, an issue that already complement what has been a challenge around climate change, there is a need for economic recovery in a number of countries in Africa, with South Africa, Nigeria being some of those. So it's safe to say that circular economy can really play a role in this space. So circular economy linked to the waste hierarchy, if we look at the waste space, but depending on where you are, circular economy applies. Key principles in the waste hierarchy, those are as they reduce, reuse, recycle, recover, and dispose, where you cannot repurpose and reuse the material. And these lessons and initiatives that are practical that can be applied throughout the different sectors. When we look at the circular economy butterfly diagram, the famous Ellen MacArthur Foundation, it basically presents the left-hand side, the biological material, opportunities that are there, and the barriers that are there. This challenges us in as far as research, development, and innovation is concerned. So there is a learning in this space, more so the need during the pandemic. You already started about countries that would have developed some remedies from this. I think in Africa, you'd have picked up some of these, for instance, in Madagascar. But what is key is the innovation and the response to the pandemic. When you look at the right-hand side, the technological side, that either resource reduction in the manufacturing as the reduction of the impact of the material that goes in there, but at the same time to ensure that there is retail participation and material recovery. And again, on the left-hand side, when we look at recent examples from the COVID-19 pandemic, you had in Rwanda, for instance, the issue of robots, the issue of the drones in other parts of the world. I think Rwanda being one of those. In South Africa, the robotic space growing, in the health facilities to assist the health personnel. But when we look at all those, eventually they become waste. And when they become waste, post-COVID-19, we faced with a challenge on how to deal with those new types of products that recently came in as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. We won't landfill all of them. There has to be a need for, there is a need for energy recovery, and they need to look at alternative forms of treatment. Informed by the waste hierarchy, but also from governance side, the issue of legislation and policy that is enabling resource recovery, identification of waste as a resource, as well as the shift from linear economy, the take, make, and dispose to a circular economy where you keep material as long as possible in the loop. So in South Africa, we have the National Waste Environmental Management Waste Act of 2008, which brings in and actually promotes the issue of the waste hierarchy. And these are some of the policy instruments that we have put in place. Following on to the Constitution, we have the NEMA, which is National Environmental Management Act. The Polokwane Declaration is about 19 years ago, where practitioners anticipated that by 2012, would have reduced 50% of waste going to landfill. And by 2022, there will be zero waste. So those are some of the things that are guiding our implementation of circular economy principles and concept to say, how do we divert waste from going to landfill? The introduction of the plastic bag regulations in 2003 started to realize that without regulatory mechanism in the space, plastics, like other products, end up becoming waste and finding themselves either in the landfill sites or in the street or anywhere where they're not supposed to be. So hence, this was together with the introduction of the levy that was discouraging the giving away for free of the plastic carrier bags, but you get them at a particular fee in order to discourage throwing them after use, but encouraging the reuse as much as possible of some of their products. It really came up recently in some of our engagements that some of the plastic carrier bags, you can use them more than 50 times. There was an example that was made of that particular type. Otherwise, the waste legislation, the waste tire regulations also promotes the issue of the reuse of the waste tires. And there are systems in place also for collection, as well as further processing of the waste tire. The National Waste Management Strategy I alluded to. Then in 2014, we had the amendment of the Waste Act, which brought to, therefore, the issue of the national pricing strategy for waste management to start thinking about resource as well as the funding associated to waste, extended producer responsibility, among other areas. The Waste Tire Regulations 2017 amended. In the exclusion regulations, we were saying waste that can be used for beneficial use can be excluded from the definition of waste such that it contributes to the beneficiation to circular economy, and hence it won't be utilized or it won't require a license any longer. Without interventions and without circular economy, these are some of the products that find themselves in the oceans, in the rivers. And again, we are implementing extended producer responsibility. I know in Nigeria it's also being implemented, but key is the issue of decent work creation, social cohesion, inclusive economic growth, as well as improved quality of life, because we understand waste as a resource. Other strategies include removing barriers and creating an enabling policy environment for implementation of circular economy, putting those strategies in place, assessing through science and evidence what are best management measures of different products, campaigns to encourage cleaning as a collection of material to reuse, recycle, as well as contribute to circular economy. The issue of research, development, innovation, contributing to circular economy I've mentioned, as well as the necessary resources to assist in that. Here is some of the materials that find themselves in the oceans and in the rivers if not well managed. The dangers to the aquatic environment if nothing is happening upstream. The products end up in the oceans and unfortunately affects the aquatic system. In conclusion, the identification of specific opportunities inherent in circular economy is key. Accelerating the adoption of circular economy increases job creation and contribution to economic growth, and also assist in the issues related to COVID-19 pandemic during, as I've mentioned, the examples of technology that is coming up, but also ahead of the examples of production of masks from waste and material that would ordinarily be going to waste. So it's an innovation that includes everyone. Collaboration, partnerships are key in ensuring that we take forward the implementation of circular economy across many parts of the continent. I thank you.
Thank you very much for that very brilliant presentation and helping us to know some of the challenges, the barriers, and indeed how policies can actually support in encouraging the mainstreaming of circular economy principles, especially with regard to prevention of waste, not even generate waste. And then you talked about the levy that South Africa actually brought about in order to discourage the diversion, in order to stop the diversion of waste to the landfill. Thank you very much. We got very useful information from all of that. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to throw the floor open. We know a number of individuals have posted questions, and some of the questions have been responded to. If you still have more questions, for the remainder part of our time, we will take these questions. But suffice it to say that some of the comment from the participants is that first and foremost, whoever has spoken, you did an excellent presentation. So thank you to all the presenters. Thank you very much for the beautiful presentations. Some of the questions I will want to read out, please. Some of them are directed to specific speakers. Others are left open. If you want to speak among the speakers, want to respond to any of them, please, you are welcome to say something regarding any of the questions. Perhaps I'll start with the first one that I see here. Although it's an anonymous, it says, what is the role for collaboration with other African countries and how can this be achieved? Perhaps Professor Young will speak to this in terms of working with other African countries. I know you have said something in this direction. And of course, the Honorable Minister also talked about what have been done to other countries at the beginning. Please, let's take note of that. I'm going to read out the whole questions. And then you can also see the questions as I read them out in the Q&A box. And if there's need to repeat them, please feel free when responding to them. You want us to repeat the questions, we can do that. And then we have another one from Lua, who says, what strategy is NESRA using to monitor and evaluate the implementation of the EPR model as indicated in the guideline? So Professor Gerald, this is specifically directed. And then there's another close one to EPR, the PR. It says, how do the PROs relate with, say, Abuja Environmental Development Agency? Is giving an example, perhaps. How do they relate with other agencies beyond NESRA now? Somebody has, and I know there have been comments, or people have actually asked for the slides. Yes, the slides with the permission of the speakers, will be shared with everyone present at this webinar. I have another one that talks on building partnership. And this is from Victor Ibangbe. He says, building partnership is indeed a good way to go. However, in Africa, generally, there is a lack of continuity in policy required. How can the political commitment needed to drive sustainable policies be assured? So, Mrs. Josh, you want to take note of this, just as any other speaker can respond to it. I have yet another question, and it says from Abbas Agbaje, will EPR be incentivized? How will compliance be achieved, particularly where changing public habit and attitude is a challenge? These are some of the questions. And I think the EPR again is directed at Professor Jaro, the DG NESRA. Perhaps let's give room for this to be responded to while we harvest other questions. Professor Jaro, and then our other great speakers, you will want to respond to any of the questions. I'll call on Professor Jaro first.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Itwa. The first question from Opelua regarding the strategies for monitoring and evaluating the implementation of the EPR model as indicated in the guidelines. So the guidelines provided all what is required for the various stakeholders, starting from the producers, the consumers, collectors, recyclers, and the government. So what we do firstly is to ensure that we sensitize all the stakeholders, we bring them together. And recently we publish in the newspaper, the dailies, where we indicated that we've given the deadline for all the stakeholders to register. So those that have not done so, that very soon will start our enforcement. So the various sanctions are in place, and very soon we'll go around those that refuse to key in, we'll sanction them based on what is provided in the EPR operational guidelines and the various environmental regulations, depending on the sector of the brown environment. So the other question has to do with how would EPR be incentivized? While the EPR model make provision for all producers to include the cost of taking care of the end of life of that material, be it the packaging material even from the beginning, if it's an electronic equipment when it comes to the end of life. So what is provided is expected to be used in funding the producer responsibility organization, which will manage the recyclers and also the collectors. So really it's going to be incentivized from that aspect. Presently, we have a pilot project in Lagos to do with the electronic waste, and we target the collection of 300 tons of waste in order to showcase the best way to do it. So these ones are going to be incentivized also. The other one is how does PRO relate with, say, Abuja Environmental Protection Board? So as a protection board that is just an equivalent of state environmental agencies, the PRO would really liaise with them, especially when it comes to issues of waste collection and recycling. For instance, some of these state boards, like the pilot project in Lagos, we have some of these state boards as part of even the management board of some of these PROs, because they are needed when it comes to the issue of policies, when it comes to the issue of implementation. So PROs are going to work hand in hand with them. Likewise, somebody asks about issue of how would NESRA key in to ensure waste collection and recycling in rural areas. It's the same thing. We have all the regulations, and presently we are battling with the cities. And when we reach the rural areas, we are going to do the same thing, to undertake sensitization, then enforcement. But what is happening in rural areas, mostly they generate a lot of agricultural waste. So already people are doing this recycling, but in an informal way. They do composting to generate organic fertilizer, which they use in their farms. Also, they use most of the agricultural waste in feeding their livestock. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Before Professor Young comes in, there is another question that might likely be of interest. He said, the question is from Mujida Ajibola. He says, how can the circular economy be integrated in international trade in Africa? And then two other questions. Any of the speakers can respond anyway. What are the specific challenges and barriers to ease transition towards circular economy in Africa? Perhaps Morgana can respond to this. And then the other one is, how can a private company receive grants to execute solar projects in rural Nigeria? Well, these are the questions we have been able to harvest that the participants have asked. Please, let's respond to them. Professor Young, you want to start?
Yeah. Thank you very much for those for the questions, Eugene, and thanks for ably moderating this. I have to run along right after my question because I'm late for another meeting. I apologize for that. Collaboration with other African countries. I think we really, like I mentioned in my presentation, that this is a very strong thing to do. You know, collaborating with others. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. South Africa has listed what they have done and so on. Rwanda has done a lot and others. How can we learn? And I don't think collaboration is something that has to be forced on somebody. We're not primary school kids. If you have a desire, if there's a political will, you know, I've had people from Nigeria go on country tours from one ministry for country tours to see what happened, from cooperations have gone on country tours to other countries to see what has worked there on some issues. And I think that would be the first thing, a peer learning mechanism. What has worked, what has not worked. Countries are abstract, but human beings in those abstract countries matter. So what would the Nigerian Economic Summit learn from the Rwanda Economic Summit, if they have something like that? What is it that they need to do? What can Rwanda learn from us? So this is not something that can be legislated on somebody. It's a political will to say that things work, then we can collaborate together. But for us, as we have some projects with financing in Africa, you know, either on green growth or on private sector, on circular economy, that will make sure that there are cross-country, you know, and inter-country initiatives. The reason we do that is to encourage this peer-to-peer learning, you know, and I'm sure Eugene, you're aware of some of those initiatives that we're doing to encourage peer-to-peer learning practice and so on. Then on the question on how can companies secure grants for solar energy in rural areas. Typically, when you understand the way the African Development Bank works, we bank nationals, we bank countries, you know. So Nigeria will take money from us, Ghana, because those are the levels we do. We try not to crowd out commercial banks and other smaller regional development banks, but seeing the need is there in reaching out to smaller organizations. We've set up initiatives like the Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa. We have the Sustainable Energy, Renewable Energy Fund, REF. We have several other smaller initiatives, which if you do check our website, you'll see it there. But I must tell you in advance that the pocket of money is small. The competition for those small pockets of money, you can only imagine how many people want to go there. So it's not like walking there, request for $30,000 and you get it, request for $100,000, you get it. There are requirements. A bank is a bank. People have put that money in there and they expect due diligence that we will use that money properly and give transparent reports back to the people that put the money in there. So due diligence will be very important on what you will deliver. I have always said most times what we have, the challenge we have is not the challenge of money, but the challenge of good project ideas. You go to a bank, they ask you, what will my money fetch me at the end of it? And you can't explain. So the proposal writing stage has become a major issue. We're just concluding the development of a training of trainers program now that will train people on project development, proposal writing, so that they can have access, not just to the African Development Bank's resources, but to other resources, because we realize that is our main challenge, actually, in getting those things done. So please, you can start with the website and see what is available, what you think aligns with your request, and what the requirements would be to access such monies. There's Fund for Energy Inclusion, FEI, is there. So please check our website and you will find where you need additional help in either understanding or being able to apply. Please reach out to me and I'll see how I can help. Thank you. Eugene, I'm not sure if there's any other specific question you wanted me to look at before I run off to another meeting.
No, not exactly, other than to tell you thank you. And especially in the words of Professor Oladipo, who is also listening to this, he has said that your presentation was very beautiful. And indeed, every other presenter, that your presentations were marvelous. Thank you very much. And indeed, we appreciated your coming and your supporting the program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, colleagues, and wish you well in the next. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then perhaps Mrs. George, you want to speak to, we have just about 3 minutes left in this program. You just want to speak for about a minute, and then Mr. Makana, we round up, then I will use the last minute to just conclude.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Eugene. I'm going to also talk a bit about the collaborations across countries. I think, what we should be focusing on are market-led, solutions and market-driven solutions to circular economy. There are quite a number of companies across Africa that are collaborating in terms of, circular economy, in terms of plastics, globally and regionally, that we then need to be able to, I think, look up to the government to be able to provide the enabling environment. That's what we need from government actors, and I think that also delves into the next question, which is building partnerships is a good way to go, but there's a lack of continuity in policies required. The lack of continuity in policies, not only in Africa, we've seen the big giant, United States of America, that has left our mouths open, right, in terms of the inconsistency in policies, where one party has come in and turned practically everything back. So again, I think is to have whatever administration is in government to be able to provide market-driven.
Mrs. Bott, you mentioned, because we have just a minute left. Mr. Mokena?
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
I said we just have just a minute left. So you've taken
yes, let me round up, Dr. Eugene, because otherwise you would have just cut me short there. So I'm just finishing.
Yeah, that is serious.
So what I was saying is that so we need to look to the private sector more than to look to the government in terms of driving the solutions for partnerships.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that beautiful intervention there. Mr. McKenna, we are right on the dots in terms of time.
Thank you very much.
Just want to,
Thank you very much, Dr. Itua. I think what is great and important to emphasize is action, to say for circular economy to happen in Africa, in Nigeria, in South Africa, we need to implement it. It is failure to act that will limit our potential for implementing the strategies that are there for circular economy. We need to assist in job creation initiatives in SMME development, as well as in growing our economies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We certainly appreciate all of you, Mrs. George, Professor Young, Mr. McKenna, Professor Gerald, and indeed our able minister, who was represented by Mrs. Halima Bari. Thank you very much. And indeed, our great and distinguished participant, we want to thank all of you for being part of this program. And indeed, just to say, we have been able to see how we can deliver better outcomes. And indeed, we have seen information to enrich the bigger conversation as we build up towards the summit coming up in October, like we said earlier, October 26 and 27, the Nigeria Economic Summit. We look forward to seeing you. If you have not registered, please go ahead and register. Go to the website, you will find the registration link.